Alright, story time. Will I keep the horse's meat and the baby's food? Given the Epstein files getting released, I'm not going to talk about them. However, they are extremely relevant because, you know, Epstein's not the only demon in human skin, I guess you could say. So, let me tell you a little bit of my story. For the sake of people being aware that this stuff happens, and maybe eventually someone will be held accountable because of this. So, forgive me while I wrangle the horses while I do this. Alright, so, this part of my story starts about, let me see, almost 17 years ago now? Yeah. Just about 17 years ago. So, when I was 18, so, there was this place in Arkansas that was supposed to be a retreat for people who had trauma, people who were just way too stressed out in life, and people who were trafficked, like to that extent. Some people were even court-ordered to go there in order to keep their children. So, I went there at 18 to deal with some stuff after getting out of a horribly abusive relationship in college, and halfway through my first semester. And let's just say it was the prettiest pit of hell that I think you could ever see. It's in the mountains, gorgeous. It's in Harriet, Arkansas. I couldn't even find it on a map before I went there. Now it definitely shows up on maps. 20 minutes, 45 minutes I think from the nearest Walmart, if I remember correctly. It's been a while since I've been there. It was run by, sorry, the irony is kind of insane. It was run by a woman named Ginger Christmas. And her daughters, at least I think 2 of her daughters worked there. I don't remember right now if another one worked. I feel like another one helped out on and off. But I can't remember. She had a few kids. I know at least one son helped out for a while. But this lady ran this retreat for troubled girls and women. The youngest age was 13. That was the youngest girl that was there at the time. They did not take girls who were not teenagers. When you got an evaluation at a doctor's office in Texas before you went, that doctor is no longer alive. His name was Dr. Minner. I have no issue naming people because they need to be held accountable, and we've tried to take legal action. It hasn't happened. Nothing's been done, or nobody would get back to us. Statute of limitations is passed. On all of it. So, Dr. Minner would prescribe a few drugs to help when you got there, so you would be on drugs as soon as you walked in, based on your evaluation and your, like, 100 and something, maybe more page paperwork that you filled out for there. And so when I got there, you had maybe an hour, maybe a bit more, to get in, have an evaluation done, like a introduction done, where you met with them, the staff, and they would basically tell you the way things worked, meet the parents, and then you would watch a little showcase that they prepared with kids or adults signing, doing sign language to music. It was always worship songs, which the more you hear, that's going to be really disturbing. And so then your parents would leave. And depending on what part of the month you got there, you would have to go to a family weekend, which is where the families were allowed to come down for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, if they could make it. And you'd get to see them and eat with them for 2 meals. Forgot how ridiculous this is. You could eat with them 2 meals. Breakfast one day, breakfast another day. They could come back and more than 3. Because so when you get there, they tell you you will be there, I think, 4.5 months. That's how quickly their program can be done in. And so they tell you, it can be done in 4.5 months if you work really hard. You do what you need to do, you work through your stuff, you get out. That is a complete wasn't it? I was there 2.5 years. And there were girls there longer than me. They gave medication to girls, not based on what they struggled with, but based on what was easy to people. So, Ginger would call Dr. and she would tell me what he needed to do to describe something immediately. No evaluation of the person, no talking to the girls, no woman, no Granted, I don't have an eating disorder anymore, but that is beside the point. I put a lot of work into that later as well. And so, sorry for skipping around a bit. Not something I thought I would talk about. Girls who had eating disorders that went covered. I was lucky. I was close enough to a healthy weight, believe it or not, at 98 pounds, that I was not forced to gain weight or eat. There were other girls much younger than me who were forced to eat until they did. And they would be put out on the cat deck. Basically, the back deck where all the stray cats ate, crap, everything. It was covered in cat crap, cat food, sometimes cat puke. The dogs would go out there and terrorize the cats. So you were forced to sit in a chair out there and eat your food. This girl was. Specifically. There were only a couple of us that were there while, like, at the same time that I was there. And if she threw up, she had to carry a bin around with cleaner and paper towels and I think one or two other things. And every time she puked up her food, she would have to clean it up. And they would make her even after she threw up. This girl, as far as I know, was not bulimic. She was anorexic, so she did not puke to lose weight. She just didn't really eat. With me, they put me on multiple protein shakes a day, and when they realized I was not gaining weight as fast as they wanted me to, they put me on full portion, which means you have to eat every single thing on your plate. You can't get rid of anything, even if you are full. So if you start puking, you have to go back and finish everything on your plate. Holidays were terrible because your plate was usually piled well over the rim with stuff, and people who know me know that I am very simple during holidays. I think they're very basics. I don't like a lot of the desserts. I don't like a lot of the special stuff. Like on Thanksgiving, I have turkey, mashed potatoes, gravy, and maybe some homemade cranberry sauce with the cranberries in it, like still, cold. That's about it. That's what I do. At this place, you have to have a full plate of like 7 or 8 different foods, piled high over the rim. Having an eating disorder, I did not eat that much. Could not eat that much. In one span of time, overlapping, with med changes, I counted 22 meds, I think, within a 6 or 8 month period. It was less than a year. I was able to look over some of the paperwork from the pharmacy and the dates, and within a short amount of time I had been on 22 meds, a lot of them at the same time as each other, most of them having lethal severe side effects with each other. When I worked at a pharmacy, my pharmacist ran interaction reports. I think it was a 6-page interaction report on just the meds I remembered that I was on that overlapped, and almost every single one had a severe lethal side effect, like your heart stops, potentially. Sometimes with no warning. All that, and it itself is significant, because it was a doctor prescribing them all to us at the same time. What's more significant is that someone did die there from a heart attack. I'm completely convinced that the medication was why, although obviously there's no proof, because how do you prove that a heart attack is from that, even if it's a side effect of or an interaction? You kind of can't prove it. And so I don't know what happened with that. I don't know if the family blamed her. I don't know if they looked into medication. I have no information about that. There was an older gentleman, and because they had started up a men's campus while I was there. So he was an older gentleman. So I don't know what happened with that. I never heard anything after we heard the initial report, which was devastating, of course. And I still, obviously to this day, wonder what happened, like what the actual story was, whether it was just a heart attack or whether it was medically induced due to medication. If we did not have, if we had side effects to medication, or we did something that was very offensive or disturbing to the owners and staff, and disturbing I say lightly, it's their version of disturbing, which basically means you didn't really do much, but they would always make it a big deal. They would have public shaming sessions where you would have to sit in the great room, big living room, on the couches, watching these horses, make sure they don't come after the baby's food. Don't do it. We would sit in the great room all in a circle, and we would have to listen to what this person did on purpose every time, even if it was a side effect of the medication. One person was having issues with muscle control, other stuff like that, and there was a public shaming session because it was their rebellion on why they couldn't control themselves. So there would be a public shaming session, and they expected people to shame the person with them. And it always happened. It was just mob rule, I guess you could say. Most people ended up saying something. But you think back later and you're like, that was insane. Why did I say something like that? Like, you didn't even know what was going on, but you would say something horrible because it was expected of you, you know? But also, you were also drugged up. And like I said, the drugs were chosen for control's sake and not actually to help you. The drugs that were prescribed were almost always used off-label. Very few drugs were used for their intended purpose. And it was always drugs that, there's this new off-label use that they're looking into. So all of us would be prescribed it for that use, anyone who they thought it might work well on. Some of them were heavy-duty medication, and they could mess your head up really bad. Easy to control. The only reason some of us were not on it is because we had reactions to it. They couldn't keep us on it because it was obvious we were reacting to a med. And they couldn't risk getting too many questions about what they were doing, of course. Now, if anyone wonders, just based on that, why we never called anyone or told anyone. First off, a lot of the girls there were troubled. Some were trafficked by their families. Some were runaways. I myself had a lot of issues. People in my comments know I've had multiple suicide attempts. My parents sent me there as a last resort. I was not a model child. There was no positive reason I went there. So, if we didn't get to talk to our families without somebody on the phone. So, I mean, everything was monitored. You didn't get the phone unless it was your family's phone call and they were on the phone with you, and you had a staff watching you, so it's not like you could hang up and call someone. And to call DCF because of the minors, you had to be there in the midst of something happening, at least in Arkansas, and call DCF from the place where it was happening, which we couldn't do because you couldn't use the phone. We had no cell phones. Cell phones were not allowed. Your cell phone was taken by your parents when they dropped you off. You could not journal, so it's not like you could write anything. The younger girls' letters were read because it was considered part of their schooling to write letters home. And so it was read for grammar, punctuation, and of course, content. If you were found to be complaining home to your families, or journaling, which basically could be if you had an idea for something that you wanted to write later. I write books. One of the books I'm writing, I wrote a quick idea. It was like small paragraph. Home to my brother. I was like, hey, I don't want to forget this for later. Keep this letter for me. I really want to remember this idea. I was banned from writing to anybody except my mom and dad. From then on, couldn't write to anybody in my family. Because they heard me mention that I had a book idea that I asked my brother to remember. And they considered that journaling. So I lost all privileges to write to my brothers. And my uncle, who was a pastor, across the country, who they had granted me the privilege of writing based on my mom's request. And so that was pretty devastating. So you learned real fast what you could and couldn't mention to other people, because there was zero chance you were not getting caught. Because if you said something to someone else and they were uncomfortable as far as, oh my gosh, it shouldn't have happened, I'm going to get in trouble for not saying it, they would tell on you to save their own skin. I do not blame anybody for doing that. It was survival. So yes, the minors' letters were reviewed. Anyone under 18. And if you told your parents something over the phone, they would cut off the phone call immediately. And you would be banned from talking to your family on the phone. Which I was, not because I said something wrong. I was just throwing up because of all the medication and the stress. I started throwing up, and so I lost my phone calls to my family. I missed my brother's wedding. I was supposed to be part of. He made me part of his wedding just because he was promised I would be there if I was, and because I couldn't stop puking, I was told I couldn't make it. I couldn't go. Yeah, so you couldn't tell anyone over the phone, you couldn't call anyone, you couldn't write it in letters. And if you did say something and they found out about it, well, you were punished severely, very severely, in multiple ways. Your parents would be told that because 99.9% of people who went there had a reputation for being rebellious or lying, and trying to get their own way and all that stuff, your parents were told that you were lying to try to get out of there. And they were having issues with you being rebellious and not listening, and they would make this whole big story. And of course, our parents sent us there because they were desperate, and it was a Christian Christian retreat. So they trusted them. We went to church. Every Sunday, we were at church. Yep. Yeah, this devil of a woman went to church every Sunday with us. In fact, their family was involved in multiple churches at the same time. Over spiritual, right? Yeah, anyway, that's all I'm gonna get into right now. I'll do a part 2 at some point, maybe, if people decide they want it.